this is Luis Marrero, and today is July the 28th, 2020. I am the host of the Work and Meaning webcast, and today we have as our first guest, Ken Howard. And the topic that Ken is going to be talking today about is finding yourself in the story, how shared transcendent meaning creates community. And for those of you who do not know about the Work and Meaning organization or team, let's put it this way, interest group, we're a part of the International Positive Psychology Work and Organization Division. We are a global think tank on applied existential and positive psychology on topics related to work, meaning, flourishing, and organizations for the creation and promotion of meaningful work. Our mission is to achieve its visions through the collaborative process of academics and practitioners from around the world. Such processes include three pillars of the purposeful work, which is practice, research, and dissemination. And for those of you who do not know Ken, I'm pleased to introduce you to him. He's the FACE leader. He's an author. He's also a consultant, a church demographer and futurist, and executive director of the FACE X project. So welcome, Ken, again. It's good to see you, and it's good to have you here in our first podcast.
Good to see you and glad to be here.
Okay, it's fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start out with the first question that we have for you, Ken, which is, how do you define meaning?
Well, I think the title of this webinar kind of gets at it. It's transcendent purpose. It's the why behind the what and the how of our lives, and in the context of work, it's the why behind the what and the how of our work, which means implicitly that meaning is an intrinsic value. Okay. It is behind the kind of symbolic value that we give it with reward and meaning and reward and punishment and all of that. But really, meaning is the baseline, underlying, motivating factor why we do what we do. It transcends reward. I often call it our minimum viable belief. It's what is at the basis of all that we do, or what transcends all that we do. How, if we boil everything down about why we do what we do and we get to the why of whys,
yes,
that is our transcendent meaning. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. That's what makes us continue to work on things and persist at things and be willing to work on things even if we know that they might fail.
Okay, so I hear you define meaning that way. It seems to be a motivational force, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's what makes it intrinsic. So great, thank you so much. Now, a lot of people, and they hear people like you talk, and people who are doing meaning-based work, they're many times intrigued. What led people to do the work that they do, especially around this topic of meaning? So that leads then to the next question, which is, how did, and sorry, move to the third one, how did meaning became part of your life?
Well, it could be a long story, but I'll try and make it short. To answer that question, I have to go back to my earliest memories, because my friends and my family will always tell you that I was kind of a strange child, and all through my life, through childhood and adolescence and on into adulthood, I was always seeking the deeper meaning behind things. So one of my earliest memories is when I was 5 years old. I was standing outside, looking up at the sky with one of my parents and seeing the stars, and then kind of mentally starting to count them. And then asked my parent, I made the mistake of asking my parent, how many? And said, it's infinite. I said, what does that mean? It says, they go on forever. And that immediately plunged me and dragged me kicking and screaming into the concept of infinity,
Yeah.
because it's one of those things that we just really can't wrap our minds around as human beings. We're finite.
Right.
And so when we start letting our mind kind of dig in, and kind of travel out into space and time, and try and seek out towards infinity, there comes a point where we can't take it anymore. And so mentally I would build a wall, and say, okay, it has to end here.
Yes,
I
yes.
can't, I can't, I can't conceive of it going beyond here. And then as soon as I would build the wall, I would want to look over it because I would know that there was something behind.
Yeah.
And so this was something, this kind of created in me a kind of a feeling of awe in the pit of my stomach, the kind of feeling that you go and that happens when you're driving in a car and you go over a big bump and fly and
Yes.
you become weightless, and then your gut kind of goes, yeah, I can't take this. That was the kind of feeling I would have every night.
Yes.
Trying to figure this out, until when I was 10 years old, I remember having one of those very, very vivid dreams where all kinds of things were going on that were impossible. I was flying, I was
Yes.
a superhero, bullets would bounce off me, all these kinds of things. And it made perfect sense when I was in the dream. And then I woke up and it finally came to me. I said, oh, I get it. All of this stuff, all this paradox of infinity can be this kind of insane kind of thing of thinking that something can be both infinite and not possible to be infinite, but yet has to be. It is possible.
Yes.
Because it's God. I'm God's dream. And if I'm God's dream, then those things can happen. I don't have to understand it, but I know that there is a first cause. And so that's what kind of dragged me into that. Always beyond that, I was always thinking there's something behind what we're doing. And what is that behind what we're doing? And that's the meaning of what we're doing.
It's fascinating. For people who don't know, I didn't mention before, Ken is an Episcopal priest in the Episcopal Church. So that's something good to know as part of the context. Well, thank you for sharing that. Again, very interesting to understand people's background and to answer the question how they got into this business of meaning in life and doing meaningful work. So let's go to the next question then, Ken. How does meaning show up at work?
Well, I think the best way to do it is to talk to you about how meaning shows up in my work, because it might show up in different ways in different people's work.
Right.
Very early on in the work that I was doing at the time, which was starting new churches, I realized that for us to be successful, we needed to know why we were there. We needed to know what our calling was, what God wanted us to do in the community, what God was already doing in the community and asking us to join, because God's always out there behind things. Right. And so every year we would ask, why do we exist? And that helped us to persist through what is a hard thing to do, which is starting an organization from scratch. So right now, I've gone beyond that to start FaithX, which is an organization that helps congregations and judicatories better understand and engage their communities. And when you're doing that kind of work with this, which is essentially a kind of community organization, you're really talking about changing organizational and community attitudes and behaviors. And the thing that we found is that data alone does not change people's minds. I mean, you can give people all the data about their community. You can tell them it's diverse, but if they don't think it is, they're not going to let go of that belief, or they're not going to change their behavior. People do not accept data, do not incorporate data into their way of thinking and believing and their attitudes and actions unless they can attribute meaning to the data. And the only way that human beings do that, the way that we human beings create meaning, ascribe meaning to things, is by story. That's how we make sense of things.
Right.
And the question then is, how do you do that? How do you help people to do that? And so that's what we do. We help people examine, probe, analyze the data so that they can find the story in the data, and they have to find it themselves. I mean, we can't tell them what it is. We call ourselves sometimes data Sherpas or trail guides. You know, we're not telling them what they need to think, believe, or do. We're helping them ground the discernment and the decision making that they have to do, and the actions they need to decide whether to take in data. We help them ground it, and we help them find the meaning of why they're there. And they do that by manipulating the data themselves, interrogating the data, if you will, asking questions about it, making assumptions and hypotheses about why things are the way they are in the community, and then going out and testing those things and engaging with the people in the community to validate their assumptions. And in the process of doing that, they create a story and they find themselves in the story. And I think one way or another, that's how meaning gets into all organizations, because all work in organization, especially if it's going to be collaborative, depends upon a shared meaning.
Okay, so when you say that they have to explore the data, analyze the data, pretty much what you ask questions such as, what is the meaning of this data? What is the data telling you? And how do you respond to the opportunities perhaps that the data is presenting? It's posing it that way, right?
Yes, yeah. And you have to come at it with an attitude that the data has to be able to change you.
That's right.
You know, you have to start with it by being clear about what you currently think and believe, you know, and what you currently think your vision and mission is. But you're not going to be able to accept the data unless you allow the story to change you. So there's a way in which you have to be open to, you have to be open to changing your own self, and understand that that you don't know everything.
That's right. That's right. And that takes us into the next question, which is, what are the gateways and barriers to meaning at work? And you just started mentioning some of it. People need to be open to the data. How do you prep them for that? How do you tackle that?
The way we do it is that we use a trusted forum to share the data. We use maps.
Okay.
We take demographic data about the communities and about the people and about the organizations that exist out there, and we put that into visual form so that people can actually treat it like, if you will, like the old triptychs that we used to get from AAA.
Yes.
Well, see, we're going down here, down this road. Now, where are the restaurants? More importantly, where are the bathrooms? And the filling stations. Where can we take a rest for a while? And you begin to create the story of your trip that way. And so that's the way that we do it. We give them a tool. We call the tool Map Dash for Faith, just a map dashboard. We ask them what it is they know, and what it is they think they know, what it is they think they don't know, or what it is that they want to find out. And then we let them pick and choose from the data and begin exploring it. And there's always somewhere along the way we find that there is a what I call the holy crap moment,
right?
Where people look at something that their biases, that they're thinking that they knew things already about their community, was keeping them blind to new data. And it's if I was to just show them that and tell them that, they wouldn't believe it. But if I let them find it,
Right.
Then they believe it. So there has to be, if you're trying to bring meaning into organizations, it really needs to be a collaborative structure that allows people to work out meaning together.
Okay. So is it pretty much helping people understand how to read the map, and then from the map have them have a conversation around the meaning of the map, what's the map telling them, versus perhaps you and your team telling them what it means and what they need to do?
Right. So we basically lead them into one of those paradoxes, one of those blind spots. Like
Right.
in one particular situation, one of the first times I actually did this was with a congregation up in Elk Ridge, Maryland, in which I was letting them kind of work their way through the maps and tell me what they wanted to look at. And then they finally got to the point where they put up what we call generational balance.
Right.
The boomers, how many boomers are here and how many
Mm-hmm.
millennials are there. And the senior warden, the head of the church board, took one look at the map and he said, "Holy crap!" Just 1,000 millennials across the street from the church.
Yes.
Why don't we see them? And that's immediately going to the question of meaning. Why is it that we're not seeing them? Which allows them to think through why they're blind, and what kinds of assumptions that they're making that are keeping them blind. So you can't change until you get to meaning, because you can't see until you get to meaning.
Yeah. And that's a powerful discovery for people to have that aha moment, as you call it, in which they realize that they had this bias, they had this or lack of understanding, or lack of understanding of what's in front of them. And once they see data, they have that aha moment. But is it also an opportunity for them to, I don't know whether you do this with your team or not, but you're doing your work, to help them understand how our biases can get in the way?
Oh, yes, for sure, because that's ultimately the answer behind all of those why questions.
Right.
Because what we do, because it's so easy, is we project our story onto other people. We project our story, our meaning onto the community. And so because because in this particular instance, because they weren't seeing millennials,
Right.
they didn't think they existed in their area. And then because they weren't, when we showed them racial and ethnic diversity, they were like, no way. there isn't a significant Hispanic community there. And I asked them why. And they said, well, why do you think that? Because there are no bodegas.
Right.
And that led to a whole discussion about their biases about what, about what all Latinos are like and what all Latinos do, not realizing that bodegas are really kind of a Caribbean phenomenon. So it really, one of the ways I like to describe it to people that we're talking about it, it's like post-purchase rationalization.
Yes.
When we drive a Volvo, we see all the Volvos.
Right.
When
Right.
we
Right.
drive a Volkswagen, we see all the Volkswagens. But if we drive a Volvo, we're not going to see the Volkswagens unless
Yes.
we want to see them.
That's right.
So it makes people have to make a conscious decision to open their mind to see what they currently might not be seeing. It kind of brings people to a kind of humility,
Right.
that we can't know all that there is to know.
That's right. It reminds me of a colleague of mine who's a gestaltist that he would say that it's important to pay attention to what we're paying attention to and pay attention to what we're not paying attention to. And then how that become an obstacle for us to see what's before us or the opportunities that are before us. Is there any other gateway or way that you approach opportunities when you're working as a team? So there's the biases. Is there anything else, Ken, that you have experienced in terms of barriers?
Well, I guess what I would say is, in terms of barriers, the more hierarchical an organization is,
Yes.
the more top-down control, the more somebody at the top is saying this is what everybody has to believe, and this is what people are motivated by, and this is the meaning of why we're here, that actually makes it less likely that there's going to be any kind of shared and transcendent meaning that will bring people together. So then people have mistaken beliefs. People often think when you start talking about meaning, the complaint I always get is, oh, that's just touchy-feely bullshit. You know, let's stick with the data. Let's stick with profit. Let's stick with the things that make a difference.
Yes.
But they don't realize that those things really are only symbolic of things that make the difference. So, you know, people think that money motivates, but it doesn't. I mean, the lack of money can unmotivate. Unfair reward can unmotivate. Right. But it's one of those things. It's, you know, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient to create meaning. People, you know, for this to happen, you've got to trust that if you open up the topic of meaning and shared meaning and why we're all here as an organization, right, it means you have to trust. Right. And we have this kind of innate thing that's worked into our understanding of business, and humanity in general, that people have to earn trust. Right. You know, that we're not going to trust them until they show that they're trustworthy. And, you know, and I know from, you know, growing up in my own childhood, that whenever my dad would say, I'll trust you when you show me you're trustworthy, I quickly found out that means I was never going to be trusted. You know? Right. Yeah. You know, so that's a problem that gets in the way of people, of an organization being able to come together around a shared meaning. Another thing is, we've been trained in business and in organizations, even in church. We've been trained to want the quick fix, and that's made us lazy. Right. So actually working on shared meaning not only takes collaboration, but it takes time, you know, and it takes effort. It's so much easier, you know, to just say this is the way it's going to be and try and push it down the organizational structure. But the more you do that, the more pushback you get, and you can have a perfect solution, and people won't do it because they have no input into it. So I've always told people, you know, that if you're going to bring meaning into your organization, you're going to have to settle for like 80-20. Right, you know, right. It's like, if we can agree on 80% around the meaning, this is good. Yes. As one mentor of mine once said, if anything's worth doing, it's worth doing half-assed. It's worth doing. You know, you do it, start it, and you'll get better at it. So, you know, flipping that for the gateways into meaning, that means that you really have to have a collaborative organizational structure for it to work. You can't have everybody share a meaning and be in control from the top.
That's right. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Right. They're antithetical to each other. And you have to be open to testing your beliefs and validating your beliefs based on results. You know, people in organizations are always saying, well, I'm results oriented. Yes. You know, profit oriented, this and that and the other. But actually, sometimes you find out that the top-down control that they're trying to achieve is actually getting them worse results than if they would take the time to provide the trust that's necessary for meaning to take root in a broad sense. They would actually get better results, which means that some of these things that we're talking about that we believe are just things that we believe because they make us feel good. You know, right. But it's not necessarily true. One example I'll give you is I was working with a marketing department at a large insurance company. Yes. And we were doing some team building, and one of the issues that they were facing was that they kept creating all of these products that nobody would buy. You know, they were really great products, you know, but
Yes.
nobody would buy them. And so we decided that part of the problem is that they weren't actually talking with the side of the organization that was really in contact with the people.
Right.
And so we decided we'd do some team building around that. And so we talked about meaning, and we talked about collaboration, and we talked about teamwork and all these other things. And I always had to couch it, coming to where they were, couching it in terms of profit and productivity and all these other things. And then when we got to the end of it, we were doing this kind of informal evaluation around the group, reflecting on the time that we'd spent together.
Yes.
And we started with, you know, just the normal people in the room, the you know, the normal marketing folks and the customer service people, asked them what it was like for them. And they said, I think this is really going to help us with our productivity. I can really see how this would work to generate more profit. I can really see how people will buy more of our products if we do this. And then it got around to the director of the division.
Yes.
He said, well, yeah, that's really true. But for the first time in 10 years, I'm really enjoying coming into work. And people all said what he said, you know, because they were being productive. They were generating more profit. They were helping people to see the value in what they were trying to sell.
Yes.
Because they were investing themselves in trying to find the meaning of, you know, why they were there and what people might want, you know, why people might want what they would have to sell. So it shifted their position in terms of, I can decide what's a perfect product, to I need to decide, I need to think about what it is that the people that I'm trying to sell to actually want, you know, and why they would want it. And so it's a shift of paradigm,
yes.
You know, if you will. And so, and you have to have you have to have patience. I've never seen an organization actually, you know, come from a top-down sense of generating meaning to to the point of developing a clear and shared meaning that would take less than 6 months.
That's right. That's right. And I think that many of us who are in OD, you know, do realize that as things take time, but because of the pressures of business, many times they try to, you know, short circuit the process, or just try to cut corners, as you were mentioning before, and that can create problems within the organization. So yeah, this is fascinating. Let's move now to the next question, because I think you have already started to touch on this topic. I mean, this question, which is, you know, some best practices for meaning at work. What would be 2, 3, 4 tips that you could, you know, pretty much share with the listeners in terms of things they should consider based on what you covered to this point? Perhaps it's just a review of some of the highlights that you've shared with us, or there might be something new. What would those be?
Well, I guess I'd preface it by saying that the reason it's worth it to do this is because that once you do this work, despite the fact that it's hard,
yeah,
you know, just like we did the moonshot, because it was not because it was easy, because it was hard.
Right.
Once you find a transcendent shared meaning, individual people become self problem solvers. They become independent problem solvers. And when they run into problems in the organization, or run into things that get in the way of their shared goals, they find their way around it without having to wait for the people on top to tell them what to do. So it becomes a really beautifully effective way of doing things. So, I mean, I guess I would say is that you have to remember that developing meaning is a cyclical process. There are steps in it that you need to do, but you have to iterate. You know, what it really boils down to, what you're trying to get to, especially in these days with COVID turning everything upside down, is that where you're trying to arrive at to survive and thrive in this time is you need a really, really, really clear vision and a willingness to experiment. That's what's going to help us not just survive, but thrive. And that means that we have to engage in a cyclical process of bringing more and more people into the organization, uh, into the discussion of what it is, of what meaning is, of what their shared meaning is. And so, it requires somebody naming the issue to begin with, that we need to share meaning around. It means calling people together who we think would have an interest in talking about this. And we usually don't start with everybody, but we start with a representative kind of select few that we think are most open to getting it. We kind of start to clarify what we think the organization holds in common. We kind of look at, okay, what is the reality, the way it is, that we're facing? What is the reality that we want it to be? What is the kind of like the gap between those things? That dreaming, helps us, that dreaming together really gets that meaning. And then we do what we call, you have to engage in a process that we like to call visioning, and that's not touchy-feely bullshit in my mind. Mm-hmm. Visioning is like, what is the why of whys? Why are we here? How can we say in one sentence, in a kind of a sticky, in a sticky phrase, why it is that we're here? What is the thing that we're here to do that we would do even if we failed at trying to do it? What are we willing to persist at to make happen? That really starts to get at what our ultimate meaning is of why we're here. And then part of the thing too, and I just started to get at this, is we need to, it's not enough, just to, visualize the data around you. It's not enough just to interrogate the data. It's not enough just to find yourself in the data. It's not enough just to decide how the data ought to change you and change the community. You also have to think about how it is you're going to communicate it. And that starts the cycle all over again, because if you have that kind of vision-driven experimentation point of view, then every time you get down to communicating it, it's another opportunity to begin the cycle all over again. And you keep getting closer and closer and closer to a shared meaning, a transcendent meaning that wraps up everybody's meaning and turns the organization into a problem-solving, vision-accomplishing organization.
That's great. Something else, Ken, that you mentioned that I don't think we should lose, and you said this in, as part of the answer to the previous question, is the fact that we're doing this for somebody, is to benefit someone. So it's not just a focus on ourselves, what we want to see in the data, what we want to do. Like, for instance, the example of the marketing group who were producing products as if there was an audience out there or a clientele out there who was willing to buy that product. There's also meaning is about extending beyond ourselves and reaching out to do some good to somebody else way out there. We agree.
Because as human beings, our meaning is always social.
Right.
We achieve value in reference to the people that we care about and love, and the more people we care about and love, the better off we are, because that expands, expands our horizon. Right. One of the things, and some people view that as an either or. Either I could think what I want, or I could think of what they want.
Right.
But when I talk to congregations about it, that are trying to connect with their communities, I say what we're really trying to form here is I always call it a holy symbiosis.
Yes.
That we're trying to create a relationship that maximally benefits ourselves, our community, and God.
Right.
And so when we think about it in terms of symbiosis, we are never in and of ourselves soul total, the sum total of things.
Right.
We are always one piece of something larger. As the Apostle Paul would say, we're all part of somebody,
Right.
And we're all part of larger bodies, and we contribute to the spirit and to the values, and to the accomplishing of good that happens from that body. And we only get it if we recognize our piece in the symbiosis. We can't be everything. We can't control everything. But to be able to understand the overall meaning and our part in it, where we reside in that story, is what gives us a kind of a shared meaning that can be really effective for ourselves and others, and for the greater good.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much. Let me do a quick summary of the key points that I heard you sort of share in terms of best practices. I heard you talk about a clear vision, that we need to do some visioning, that we must have, again, based on that vision, a transcendent shared meaning, okay, for the whole team to follow, and create conditions where if there's a missing part, that people will take the initiative to fill that vacuum, that gap, to make sure that things do get done. If someone else, for instance, is not able to respond, that this is a cyclical process that you have to iterate. Okay, the best practices, the things that are going to keep moving the agenda forward. A willingness to experiment. I also heard you say that there's value in people discussing what meaning is defining meaning, and what is shared meaning. And that it's good to start as a small group of committed stakeholders are, willing to move forward the initiative. Help people get grounded in reality, and what is the reality as it is today, what kind of reality we want for the future, and then what is the gap and how do we close that gap. And then very important for people to know how to communicate, and have that ongoing process of communication so that that vision can be fulfilled. Did I capture all the key points?
That's excellent. As we say in my business, bless you, my son.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing again, your definition of meaning, how you go about your story around meaning, and also how you go about in this work. I'm sure that our listeners are going to benefit quite a bit from that. So thank you so much for being with us today. Now, a question for people who would like to learn more about the work that you do. How can they reach you? And I'm going to put in the next slide, which talks about how to be reached. But can you say something more about how you can be reached, Ken?
Okay. Well, we have a website, faithx.net. By the way, the X in FaithX stands for experimental. So you can find out a lot about us just by going to the website. It's a very, a deep, interactive, and story-oriented website. You can contact me personally at ken@faithx.net. That's my email, pretty easy to remember. Excuse me. And I'm always willing to sit down and have at no charge, even though this is a consulting practice that FaithX is a consulting practice. I'm always willing to sit down with somebody for a half an hour and look at possibilities, and you can book a half an hour of my time by using my scheduling app, which is at kenhoward.youcanbook.me. Go there, book a half an hour, and we'll talk by Zoom.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much again, Ken. And if you want to become a member of the Work and Meeting community, again, you can contact me at Luis Marrero is my name, and you can reach me at Luis, Luis, at bostoninp.com. And Boston IMP stands for Boston Institute for Meaningful Purpose. So again, thank you very much, Ken. Thank you very much for our guests for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in our next podcast, our next webcast. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Namaste.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Bye-bye.